Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before we begin, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy these stories and want to support the channel, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every like, every comment, and every subscription really helps a small channel like this reach more people through the YouTube algorithm. I'm still new to YouTube, and your support means more to me than you probably realize. So, let's get started. Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1945. A cold winter night in Fayetteville, West Virginia. Inside a large family home, the Sodder family was getting ready for bed. The holiday season had finally arrived. The children were excited, presents were opened, the house was filled with the warmth and noise that only a large family can create. Nothing unusual was observed, nothing dangerous seemed to be in sight. And yet, before sunrise, the 5 children will disappear. They won't disappear from the room. They won't get lost in the forest. Disappeared under circumstances that remain a matter of debate. And many years later, one question still remains unanswered. Did these children die in a fire? Or were they taken? The Sodders were well known in their community. The father, George Sodder, was an immigrant from Italy. He had arrived in the United States as a young man. And over the years, he built a successful trucking business. The family was financially stable, well established, and widely known throughout Fayetteville. George and his wife Jenny had 10 children. Their home was often full of activity, laughter, arguments, music, the ordinary sounds of family life. Nothing about the Sodders suggested that they would one day become the center of one of America's most enduring unsolved mysteries. Yet that's exactly what happened. That evening seemed completely ordinary. As Christmas Eve turned into Christmas morning, some children asked if they could stay up a little longer. Their mother agreed. The younger children continued playing, while the older members of the family gradually went to bed. Nothing unusual was observed. Nothing seemed strange. That was the last confirmed night the 5 children were known to be in the house. At least, that's the official version of what happened next. But as you'll soon learn, the official explanation has been questioned for decades, and many questions that arose that night have never been fully answered. Shortly after midnight, Jenny Sodder received a strange phone call. A woman she didn't recognize asked for someone who did not live there. Voices and laughter could be heard in the background. The caller appeared unconcerned. The conversation was brief, and at the time, Jenny did not consider it an emergency. She hung up and continued with her evening. Years later, she would remember that phone call, because after what happened next, many details from that night would take on a very different meaning, including that call. Around 1 a.m., Jenny noticed that the lights downstairs were still on. Some of the children had apparently fallen asleep without turning them off. She switched the lights off, checked the house, and returned to bed. A short time later, she was suddenly awakened. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The smell of smoke filled the house. She could see flames. The fire was spreading rapidly. The Sodder home was on fire. Chaos erupted immediately. George and Jenny rushed to save their children. Some family members escaped. Others were helped to safety. Smoke filled the rooms. Flames spread rapidly through the house. The situation was becoming desperate. But as the family gathered outside, a horrifying realization struck them. 5 children were missing. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty. The 5 children had last been believed to be somewhere inside the house, and none of them had come out. George desperately tried to reach the 2nd floor. The flames stopped him. He attempted another route. That failed too. Then he remembered something important. A ladder normally stood beside the house. He could use it to reach the upper floor. He ran toward the spot. The ladder wasn't there. Not where it was supposed to be. At the time, it seemed like a terrible piece of bad luck. But later, many people would look back on that moment and wonder whether it was simply a coincidence at all. The situation became even stranger. George kept trucks on the property. The plan was simple. Use one of the trucks, drive it close to the house, climb onto it, reach the upper floor, rescue the children. But when he tried to start the vehicles, they wouldn't start. According to later accounts from the family, the trucks had not been experiencing problems before the fire. Now, they were useless. For George, every second mattered, and with each failed attempt, the chances of reaching the children grew smaller. The timing was extraordinary and deeply unsettling. Meanwhile, the family desperately tried to contact the fire department, but the phone line was not working. No response. No help. Neighbors eventually attempted to contact emergency services themselves, but valuable time was lost. By the time firefighters arrived, the house had been largely destroyed. Much of what could burn had burned, and at first, many people believed the same thing. The missing children had died inside the fire. For many observers, the explanation seemed obvious, except it wasn't that simple. Because when investigators examined the remains of the house, they encountered a problem. Or at least, a problem from the Sodder family's perspective. The findings did not convince George and Jenny that the 5 missing children had died in the fire. Officials believed the children had perished in the blaze. And for many people, that explanation seemed reasonable. But George and Jenny remained unconvinced. They questioned whether the evidence truly supported that conclusion. At first, officials suggested that the intensity of the fire explained the lack of clear answers. Many people accepted that explanation. George and Jenny did not. And that doubt would only grow stronger with each passing year, because the more they investigated, the stranger the story became. But what if the story wasn't that simple? What if the children never died in the fire? What if they were no longer inside the house when the flames spread? And what if the strange events from that night, the phone call, the missing ladder, the trucks that wouldn't start, and the delayed emergency response, were more than isolated coincidences? At first, questions like these sounded impossible. Most people accepted the official explanation. The case appeared settled. But in the years that followed, new witnesses would come forward, new claims would emerge, and new questions would begin to challenge what many people thought they knew. Because the mystery of the Sodder children was only beginning. And perhaps the most disturbing detail of all was still waiting ahead. Because in the years that followed, the Sodder family would encounter something they could not easily explain. Something that strengthened their belief that the official story might not be the whole story. A clue that would keep them searching for answers for decades. A clue so unusual that people are still debating its meaning today. And that's where our story is headed next. In the days following the fire, the official explanation seemed straightforward. The missing children had died in the blaze. For many people, that conclusion made sense. But George and Jenny Sodder refused to accept it. Not because of emotion alone, but because they believed important questions remained unanswered. Or perhaps because the answers they were given did not satisfy them. No matter how many times they replayed the events of that night in their minds, one question continued to haunt them. Where were the children? According to reports, investigators believe the missing children had perished in the fire. At first glance, that explanation seemed reasonable, but George Sodder began asking difficult questions. The fire had burned for only a matter of hours. Could it really have destroyed all evidence of 5 children? George wasn't convinced, and the more he thought about it, the more doubts he had. Why did so many details from that night seem unusual? The strange phone call, the missing ladder, the trucks that wouldn't start. Were these unrelated events, or were they part of something larger? George didn't know, but he was no longer willing to accept simple answers. Then witnesses began coming forward. And that's when the story became even stranger. Some people claimed they had seen the missing children after the fire. Others reported unusual activity around the house before the blaze. One witness later stated that she had seen children who resembled the Sodder children not long after Christmas. Another claimed to have seen a group of children accompanied by unfamiliar adults. None of these reports were ever conclusively verified. Individually, they proved nothing. But together, they gave the Sodder family a reason to keep asking questions. And with each new report, one possibility became harder for them to ignore. What if the official conclusion was wrong? One of the most discussed witness reports came from a woman who believed she had seen several of the missing children at a roadside stop. According to her account, the children were accompanied by a group of unfamiliar adults. She later recalled that some of the adults appeared to have Italian backgrounds or were speaking Italian. Something about the encounter stayed with her. She felt the children were being closely watched. Could she have been mistaken? Absolutely. The report was never conclusively verified. But the Sodders noticed something important. Stories like this kept appearing. Again and again and again. Individually, none of them proved anything. Together, they kept hope alive. Over time, George became convinced that the fire itself was not the central mystery. The children were. Because if the children had survived, then something else must have happened that night. Something that had never been fully explained. But what? And who was involved? This is where many theories begin, and where most of them begin to struggle. Because unlike many disappearance cases, there was no obvious suspect, no ransom demand, no confession, no direct evidence explaining what happened to the children. Only fragments, witness accounts, rumors, questions, and a family that refused to stop searching. This is the point where many people make a mistake. They start treating every strange detail as proof. But strange details are not proof. They are clues. And clues can point in more than one direction. A good investigation asks two questions at the same time. What supports this theory? And just as importantly, what contradicts it? That distinction matters, because once emotion takes control, almost any mystery can appear solved, even when it isn't. The Sodder case is a perfect example. There are clues that seem to support different conclusions, and there are questions that remain unanswered no matter which theory you choose. That's what makes this case so difficult and so fascinating. Years passed. Most missing person cases gradually fade from public attention. The Sodders refused to let that happen. They continued searching, following leads, contacting witnesses, and speaking to journalists whenever new information emerged. Eventually, they did something remarkable. They built a large billboard. It displayed photographs of the missing children, along with details of the case, and a simple question: what happened to them? For years, the billboard stood as a public reminder that the family had not given up hope and had not stopped searching for answers. The billboard became famous. Travelers saw it. Locals discussed it. And the mystery refused to disappear. Then, many years after the fire, something unexpected arrived in the mail. Something that would strengthen the Sodders' belief that the story was not over. A photograph. A photograph of a young man, and according to the family, he looked remarkably familiar. The image appeared to show a young adult man. Attached to it was a brief message. The Sodder family believed the man resembled one of the missing children, specifically Louis Sodder. The resemblance was strong enough that the family took the photograph very seriously. For George and Jenny, it represented something they had been searching for since 1945. Hope. But hope and evidence are not the same thing. No definitive connection was ever established. No conclusive proof emerged. And no one was able to confirm the identity of the man in the photograph. Even today, that question remains unanswered. Yet the photograph became one of the most discussed pieces of the entire case, and one of its most enduring mysteries. The photograph is fascinating, but from an investigative perspective, it creates a challenge. People naturally focus on what they hope to find. When someone desperately wants a loved one to be alive, similarities can become easier to notice. That doesn't mean the family was wrong, and it doesn't mean they were right. It simply means we must separate possibility from certainty, because those are not the same thing. A possibility invites questions. Certainty requires evidence. And in this case, certainty remains frustratingly absent. Today, two broad explanations continue to dominate discussions of the case. The first is the official explanation. The children died in the fire. The unusual events from that night were unrelated coincidences, and the witness reports that followed were honest mistakes. The second explanation is far more controversial. It suggests that at least some of the children may have survived the fire, that something happened before or during the blaze that has never been fully explained, and that the witness reports and later clues may have reflected a deeper truth. But there is a problem. Neither explanation answers every question, and neither explanation has ever been proven beyond doubt. The truth? Nobody knows, and that is why the mystery still endures. Perhaps the most important lesson of this case has nothing to do with fire, or witnesses, or mysterious photographs. It has to do with uncertainty. Human beings dislike unanswered questions. Our minds are constantly searching for complete stories, clear endings, definitive answers. But reality does not always provide them. Sometimes all we have are probabilities, possibilities, and unanswered questions. The Sodder case remains powerful not because we know the answer, but because we don't. Nearly 80 years later, the same question remains. What happened to those 5 children? And that brings us to the final question. If the 5 children truly died in that fire, why has this mystery endured for so many decades? But if they survived, what happened to them? Where did they go? And why were no definitive answers ever found? Perhaps the truth faded with time. Perhaps crucial evidence was lost. Or perhaps someone carried the answer with them to the grave. We simply don't know. And that uncertainty is what has kept this case alive for nearly 80 years. In any case, the story of the Sodder children remains one of America's most enduring mysteries, and one of its most debated. What do you think? What do you believe really happened to the Sodder children? I'd love to hear your thoughts and theories. Feel free to share them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing the video with others who enjoy mysteries and true stories. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.